History is not a river flowing inevitably to a known sea. It is a fragile cascade of moments, each one a potential tipping point. We live in the world that is built upon the bones of chances taken and disasters survived. But haunt the archives, listen closely to the whispers in the halls of the past, and you will hear the echoes of the worlds that could have been. We stand in the mid-14th century. The year is 1347. Europe is full. It is a continent brimming with life, a world defined by two unshakable pillars, the absolute power of the Holy Church and the unyielding structure of feudalism. The great cathedrals, monuments of stone and glass, stretch toward a heaven that is closer and more real than the soil beneath one's feet. The population has boomed for 3 centuries, unchecked, but the system is straining. The Great Famine, only decades past, showed the cracks in the foundation. The land can barely support the millions who work it, bound not by choice, but by birth. Society is a rigid pyramid, the king at the peak, the armored knight below him, the powerful bishop beside him, and at the broad, struggling base, the serf. His life is one of toil, his destiny prescribed from the moment of his first breath. In England and France, the 100 Years' War rages, a dynastic struggle of kings and nobles, fought by peasants who have no stake in the outcome. It is a world of faith and fear, of stark divisions. It is a world on the very edge of catastrophe. Far to the east, on the Crimean Peninsula, at the Genoese trading port of Kaffa, a different kind of war is being waged. The Mongol armies of the Golden Horde lay siege, but an invisible ally fights with them, a mysterious sickness that turns the body black, that swells the lymph nodes, that brings a swift and agonizing death. In an act of desperate, primitive biological warfare, the Mongol Khan orders his catapults to launch not stones, but the infected corpses of his own dead over the city walls. The Genoese merchants panic. They flee. They take to their ships, heading west, back to the heart of Christendom. They carry silks, spices, and death. In October of 1347, their ships dock in Messina, Sicily. The ports of Genoa and Venice soon follow. The Black Death has arrived. In 5 short years, it will claim half of Europe. 50 million souls. The world we know, the modern world, is born from this fire. The old order is shattered. Labor becomes scarce. Peasants revolt. The power of the church is questioned. And the individual, having stared death in the face, is suddenly, terrifyingly, aware of himself. The Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, all of it grows from the ashes of the plague. But what if it did not? What if the single most important event of the last millennium simply failed to occur? This is the ultimate what if. What if, on the vast cold steppes of Asia, the bacterium Yersinia pestis failed its evolutionary test? What if it never mutated into the hyper-virulent killer that traveled through the air, as well as the flea? Or perhaps, a simpler twist of fate. A storm in the Black Sea, sinking the Genoese fleet before it ever reached the Bosphorus. What if the vector of history's greatest change was broken? What if the Black Death never happened? The ships arrive in Messina. A few sailors are ill. A localized fever, quickly contained. The ports remain open. Trade continues. The year 1348 dawns, and Europe continues. The pyramid does not crumble. The pillars do not fall. The Middle Ages do not end. The first, most immediate consequence of this non-event is not relief, but pressure. The fundamental crisis of the 14th century was not spiritual, it was Malthusian. Too many people, not enough land, not enough food. The Black Death, in its brutal calculus, solved this problem. In our new timeline, the problem is never solved. It only deepens. The population continues to grow. By the year 1400, Europe is starving. The meager harvests are divided among too many mouths. The peasant, in our world, became a valued commodity. His labor suddenly worth negotiating. He could demand wages, freedom. In this world, human life becomes the cheapest commodity of all. There are 10 men for every job, 100 for every plot of land. The nobility and the church, their power never challenged, react not with reform, but with repression. The feudal system, which in our world began its long death rattle, instead calcifies. It becomes stronger, more rigid, more absolute. Serfdom is not abolished, it is reinforced with brutal laws. Peasants are bound to the land not just by tradition, to feed their lord, but by law, to feed the starving continent. Vagrancy is a capital crime. To leave one's village is to be hunted down. The great peasant revolts of our history, the Jacquerie in France, the Wat Tyler Rebellion in England, were born of a new, desperate hope, a sense of opportunity. Here, there is no hope, there is only order. The armored knight, who in our world would soon be rendered obsolete by new forms of warfare, remains the ultimate arbiter of power. He is the enforcer of this ironclad system. And what of the church? In our timeline, the plague was a spiritual cataclysm. The institution failed. It could not explain the suffering. It could not stop the dying. Its priests died alongside the sinners. This crack in its authority widened into a chasm, allowing for the skepticism that would fuel the Renaissance and the outrage that would ignite the Reformation. But here, that crack never appears. The church, facing the minor, contained illnesses of the 1340s, is triumphant. The prayers, they say, worked. God's mercy preserved Christendom. Its authority is not questioned. It is magnified. It is seen as the only thing that stood between humanity and the abyss. Heresy is not just a theological crime, it is a social one, a threat to the very order that is keeping the starving masses from collapsing into total chaos. There is no room for a Jan Hus, no space for a John Wycliffe, and a century later, the very idea of a Martin Luther, a single monk challenging the entire edifice of Roman authority. It is not just unthinkable, it is impossible. The intellectual oxygen for such a rebellion simply does not exist. The Renaissance, that explosion of art, humanism, and science, is stillborn. The Renaissance was funded by new money. The merchant bankers of Florence and Venice, families like the Medici, who rose in the new dynamic economy created by the plague's reset. In this timeline, there is no reset. Wealth remains where it has always been, in land. The old aristocracy retains its monopoly. The merchant class remains a subservient, limited entity. Why would this stagnant society fund art that celebrates the human form, when the human is a wretched, expendable creature? Why would it pursue science, when all answers are already provided by dogma? The intellectual life of Europe remains centered in the monastery, not the university. Scholasticism, the dry, circular logic of the High Middle Ages, is not overthrown by humanism. It is perfected. The goal of the mind is not to discover the new, but to endlessly categorize and validate the old. The printing press, if it is invented at all by the mid-15th century, is not a tool of revolution. It is a tool of control. Its use is strictly licensed by the Church, used to print Bibles, papal bulls, and feudal law codes. The wildfire spread of ideas, the very engine of our modernity, is extinguished before it can even be lit. We must now leap forward, pushing through centuries that, in our world, were defined by breathtaking change, the age of discovery, the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment. In this new timeline, these ages do not have names, because they do not happen. We arrive in the year 1600. In our world, this is the world of Shakespeare, of Galileo, of the first stirrings of global empires. In this world, the year 1600 looks, sounds, and feels almost identical to the year 1300. The map of Europe is a fractured mess, a patchwork quilt of tiny baronies, duchies, and bishoprics, all engaged in the same petty, localized warfare of the medieval era. The great nation-states, France, England, Spain, have failed to consolidate. How could they? The power of the central king remains perpetually checked by his powerful feudal vassals, the great lords who command their own armies of armored knights. The 100 Years' War perhaps never truly ended, but simply guttered into a state of permanent, low-level conflict, the Long War. Gunpowder, which in our world toppled the castle walls and ended the age of the knight, is a slow-burning development. Without the centralized monarchies to fund cannon foundries, without the dynamic merchant cities to engineer them, it remains a novelty, a firework used in siege, but not a revolutionary force. The knight, in his polished plate armor, remains the master of the battlefield. And what of the world beyond? Did Europe discover the Americas? It is unlikely. The voyages of Columbus and da Gama were not lonely acts of genius. They were the culmination of Renaissance technology. The caravel, the astrolabe, funded by new, ambitious monarchies seeking trade routes to bypass the Ottoman stranglehold on the east. In this alternate 1600, that impetus is gone. The Ottoman Empire, facing a divided, stagnant, and technologically backward Christendom, is perhaps the dominant power in the world. Perhaps Vienna fell. Perhaps the Turks control the Mediterranean. Europe is turned inward, isolated, obsessed with its own theological purity and feudal squabbles. The Americas remain untouched by European ships, their civilizations free to rise and fall on their own terms. The world is a multipolar one, where the Aztec, the Inca, the Ming, and the Ottoman empires are the great centers of civilization, and Europe is a benighted, overpopulated, and fanatically religious backwater. Let us be brave and journey further. The year is now 1800. In our world, the smoke of the Industrial Revolution darkens the skies of Manchester. The ink of the American Declaration and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man has dried. The steam engine is churning. The power of reason has been unleashed for good and for ill. We see this new alternate world. It is a nightmare of stability. The population has been kept in check not by plague, but by chronic, grinding famine. Generations live and die in the same villages their ancestors inhabited 500 years before. The sky is clear of coal smoke. The air is thick with the smoke of wood fires and incense. The dominant sound is not the factory whistle, but the monastery bell, which rings 10 times a day, marking the hours of prayer, the only structure in a life of servitude. Technology is not non-existent. It has simply taken a different path. Without the need for labor-saving devices, labor is the one thing they have in surplus. There are no spinning jennies, no steam engines. But perhaps the craft of stone masonry, of glassmaking, of manuscript illumination, has reached a level of breathtaking, obsessive perfection. The cathedrals are larger, more elaborate than anything we could imagine, built over centuries by generations of serfs who see it as their only path to salvation. Science remains natural philosophy, a branch of theology. To study the stars is to map the perfection of God's divine order, not to understand physics. Galileo's heresy would not have even been a trial. It would have been an impossibility. The earth is, and always will be, the center of the universe, because God and the Church have decreed it. The irony of this world is staggering. In sparing itself the greatest tragedy in its history, this Europe damned itself to perpetual childhood. It is a world without progress, but also perhaps without the horrors of our progress. There is no 30 Years' War, no Napoleonic slaughter, no factories chewing up the lives of children. But this peace is the peace of the prison yard. It is a world without doubt, without ambition, without choice, without liberty. It is a world where the highest human aspiration is not to be free, but to be obedient. The Middle Ages, in their most rigid and dogmatic form, were preserved in amber. We must now return. We pull back from this dark, stagnant timeline, this world that never was. One single microorganism, one bacterium. In one timeline, it fails, and a continent remains enslaved to tradition. In our timeline, it succeeds, and in its wake, 50 million people die. It is a price that is incomprehensible, a suffering we cannot fathom. But the bill had to be paid. The Black Death was not a judgment. It was a random biological event, but its consequence was the destruction of the old world, making way for the new. It was the fire that cleared the forest, allowing new, different, and complex things to grow. It gave us the Renaissance. It gave us the modern age. It gave us ourselves. This reality, this what if, forces us to confront a terrifying question. Is our modernity, our very concept of individual freedom, a product of divine will or human genius? Or is it merely an accidental byproduct of a mass casualty event? This alternate history teaches us that progress is not inevitable. It is not a promise. It is a fragile, contested thing, often bought at an unthinkable price. We look back on our past, on the darkness of the plague, and we must see it for what it was. Not just an end, but a beginning. It shows us that history is not written in stone, but in blood and tears, constantly reshaped by the tides of what if. But this is just one possibility. What do you think would have happened if the Black Death never arrived? Would humanity have found another path to the modern age, or would we still be living in the shadow of the castle wall? Leave your own theory in the comments. If you enjoy exploring the infinite realities of what if, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because history is never truly finished.